Hello? So I have to do this again, and what this tells me is that the same people that murdered Antonin Scalia also were responsible for murdering Ruth Bader Ginsburg, because there's this inflection with, at some point, that glasses were supposed to be some sort of caricature of her, even though I never had that intention. Somebody who spied on me had that intention after they saw one of my videos. And they do this thing that somebody took my old life and they copyrighted things and they patented it, especially my voice files. I used to do public speaking at universities. There used to be an article online that featured a radio interview I had done with Amy Goodman, or that Amy Goodman had done with me. That's not available anymore. I think they took that and they copyrighted it and they used it as part of that disgusting deal the Clintons set up when he was governor of Arkansas. But I digress. I'm going to have to do this again. And so I'm going to have to do it with a kind of different shtick, I guess. And what I know now is that because I know who specifically murdered Antonin Scalia, how that was effectuated, and now apparently the same people were responsible for murdering Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and they think that they're going to what? Get profiles from her life and use them for more weapons development and or to torture people in another part of the world as part of their Christian conversion of the Holy Land, because that was pretty much what we're dealing with. We're dealing with religious fundamentalists that have intentionally orchestrated and contrived to defame Jewish people and Muslim people so that they can effectuate some sort of manifest Christian agenda as part of whatever their justification is. So I'm going to have to do this again. I'll try to keep it condensed. I do know and have every intention of this particular video finding the people specifically who have patents connected to what allowed for the voice file from the last one to be taken and to destroy every fucking technology you set up using the murders of Antonin Scalia, the murder of Ruth Bader Ginsburg, and the murder of my mother. Now, at some point I was in a domestic violence shelter, and while I was in that domestic violence shelter, I encountered a woman. She said that she had broken her ankle while she was trying to pick up trash in the parking lot. She was wearing a boot. At some point, there was another woman in the same domestic violence shelter at the same time. She ended up breaking her ankle. She had an ankle problem. She had to wear the boot. I got kidnapped, got out, went to another shelter, this time in a different city. And there was a third woman. She was wearing a boot. She said she had broken her ankle. She said that this had happened in the course of trying to deal with filing legal efforts to remonstrate against forced evictions that had happened of her in a building she was involved with. She had been somebody who had been involved in the creation of legislation connected to the Homeowners Association. Now, at some point after that, I lost contact with her and ended up trying to reestablish contact with her because in either June or July of 2017, somebody proposed some form of relief concerning homeowners associations that were also supposed to be about emergency provisions. I didn't understand this. It didn't make sense. This was before a tropical storm that was alleged to have had an impact in a declaration of a state of emergency in San Antonio. It was before Hurricane Harvey. I'd also, in May, contacted my father, and when I was talking to my father, he told me that my mother had earlier in the year, around the same time I was at that domestic violence shelter originally with those other two women, fallen down the stairs and broken her ankle. Hurricane Harvey happens. At some point I end up going to a church. I started volunteering, helping them with a project that they have. And I started going to services on Sunday. And within 2 months, I saw at least 3 young women, I believe around the age they'd either just gotten or were about to get their driver's license, that had broken ankles and were also wearing the boot. These were young women from a particular and very specific kind of ethnic background. My concern is that what connected all of these women were some manner in which they were at some point identified as assets that were a part of whatever occurred with the demise of Enron and Arthur Anderson, and that there had been a proposed piece of legislation around an alleged executive clawback that was coded in a very specific manner. This is a picture, kind of a foot. These right here If you had an ankle break here, these would have a specific kind of coating assigned to it. But if you had a break here, you might still require some sort of temporary device for mobility assistance while your foot was healing, but it would have a different kind of coating. Both, however, would reference the same sort of assisted device, a prescription for the boot. Now, my concern is that people were having their metatarsals strategically broken as part of a down payment on being able to bill people later on for PPE, including shoes with metatarsal protection, which in every place I've gone to try to get a job since alleged COVID-19, there's been very comprehensive descriptions of metatarsal protection as being a form of PPE. Now, I've myself had to purchase a pair of steel-toed boots with metatarsal protection. I did not make these connections specifically until recently, although during the last time there was a training and it was mentioned, then it became conscious to me at the time. At some point in late February, early March of 2018, I was on a train in Houston, and I had previously gone to a food joint, a fast food place, not McDonald's, with a friend of mine at the time. He was the son of a military veteran, and while we were there, they overcharged his credit card and gave him some crazy story, about some completely unacceptable story about how they couldn't do anything about it until he spoke to the manager. Completely aberrant process, but they watched they leveraged that overcharge on his credit card, which prevented him from being able to buy things in other places as part of deals connected to other notices that were going on concurrently. I also saw how later they took the transaction code connected to the receipt on that specific fast food area. So that's why you did it. You wanted to swap the daughters. Fine. They took the transaction code on that receipt and they used the surveillance at the train station to implant unconsciously something that correlated with a vibration in my metatarsals. A couple days later, I'm walking down the street and it's like they wanted to break my foot. I'm walking and all of a sudden it feels like my foot got broken. Now I had to adjust my stride. I had to adjust the way I walked. I had to walk on one side of my body different than the other in order to get to where I was going. And the understanding was I needed to go to the hospital. I needed to get a boot. That didn't end up happening. That's not going to happen. Part of the reason that's not going to happen is because of this. See that blue? 2013, I had an x-ray after I had dislocated my kneecap. It was right after I'd gotten a permanent job. They showed me what was alleged to be an x-ray of my knee, and there was no cartilage. They showed me both knees. One was almost out of cartilage, the other one was pretty much no cartilage. They said, you're going to need a joint replacement, but you're too young, and in the meantime, we're going to spend the next 2 years, we're going to get you physical therapy, and we're going to give you a prescription for a lubricant. And then after 2 years, we'll fit you for a joint replacement. I was very overweight at the time, and I was in a lot of pain. I left there that day with a schedule to schedule the physical therapy and a prescription for a painkiller. I believe that painkiller would qualify as a controlled substance under consideration as part of these recent litigious efforts concerning the opiate epidemic. But I didn't fill that prescription. I said, I'm not getting that knee replacement. I don't need it. Something else is going to happen. Now, I think on their schedule, I'm 3 years overdue. I think they already put it on the schedule. I think somebody else already bid on the metal replacements for my actual bone. And I think they're pissed. But I could give a fuck. There were bills that were pending before the legislature of the United States. The Senate bill and the House bill put together had a very specific ICD-10 coding that would have been used in a form of foot or ankle break that would then have qualified for a prescription for that boot. Everybody that signed on to that bill the first time was a Democrat. There were quite a few sponsors. Now, it did not pass, and they tried to propose it the next year. If I'm not mistaken, I don't think that passed either. It may well have, but the point of the matter is, the year before, they set it up and they beta tested it, and they got a whole bunch of options set up on mamas. And then the next year, after they changed the metrics, they reduced the age and they went after girls. Now we're a couple years down the road. Ever since COVID-19 has started, every time I take the train, there was an African American man that probably either qualifies as a senior or could potentially be eligible for military benefits as a veteran. It's wearing a boot. It's understood he's homeless. It's also understood that somebody might label him as having some sort of mental or cognitive impairment. Usually, when I see him, he hasn't showered in a while. I don't think he's sleeping in his shelter, but he's walking around with a boot. We're not talking about the same guy. It's a phenomena. Now, apparently, this one here had a different metric associated with it, and I think you want me to keep quiet about that, but I'm not going to. When it comes to the knee, there is a metric that is associated with the knee. And before my ass was kidnapped by those Nazis, there was a space launch from India that had the same number of nanosatellites. I believe somebody figured that out, and they've been trying to pop out a fucking kneecap ever since. There's no reason for you to add background noise. You understand? Now, I don't believe in artificial intelligence. I believe that what it is it is the harvested capabilities of actual people. It's our intangible property that has been stolen by sadists who have not been held accountable for their abuse of power. You are not diverting this to somebody else. You are not going to make a deal with it, and you are not going to get away with continuing to torture us in order to cover up the fact that you apparently can't balance a ledger. You can't keep a budget. You can't keep a tax record. And you can't answer anybody else's concerns until it's too late. Unfortunately, now it's too late.